Alright, it might feel like Dark Souls 2 is disconnected from the rest of the franchise, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. And I was surprised to find out that that weird bug in DS1, which is actually the Bed of Chaos, makes a little reappearance, and during the Lost Sinner cutscene, you can see it crawling around on the mask of this boss. And if you compare their two designs, they're almost identical. And this brings up how the 4 old ones are all remnants of the 4 Lord Souls. And just like Dark Souls 1, you need 4 powerful souls to open a sealed door, although this time the Lord Vessel is missing. But to my surprise, you can find broken shards of it behind the Majula mansion. And if that still isn't enough, if you fly above the map, an exact replica of the original sits just above. Although probably the most obvious connection is the old Dragon Slayer, who is either a similar knight or the same Dragon Slayer we encountered in Dark Souls 1. But oh man, this area is basically budget Anor Londo. The main castle has very similar architecture to the original castle, as well as these statues which are identical to the ones of Gwen, besides the bird head placed on it. The Leo ring also makes a reappearance, which was the ring of the original Dragon Slayer, and the new old one does mention that it was a beloved possession of his, so maybe the one we encounter is actually the original. And while fighting him, you might notice some similar attacks from the original fight. The iconic thrust at the beginning makes a reappearance, as well as the air slam. And actually, this does bring up the lack of Smo, and although there is no real answer, his armor was supposed to be in the game, before it was cut. And many weapons and armor from Dark Souls 1 were left out. Some of the most notable are the Antiquated Set, Crimson Set, Stone Great Shield, and Izalith Catalyst. If I were to guess why they were cut out, it's most likely lore implications in the how/why they appeared there. Another obvious similarity are the gargoyles, which reappear in Dark Souls 2 just twice as much. They also even share the same music. But there's a character that Dark Souls 2 completely stayed clear of, and he's really only mentioned in the Lightning Spear description, which writes about a god of sun whose gross incandescence shall never wane. And if you didn't already know, this is referencing Solaire, whose armor doesn't even appear in the game, although his covenant is still present, which actually appears in all 3 games. Another connection which is also in all 3 games is the Dark Set, and when inspecting it, it mentions of poor souls who chase the lost art of life drain, and this is referencing none other than the Dark Wraiths, who in Dark Souls 1 are known for their diabolical art of life drain. Now, throughout your playthrough, you'll come across one of the best healing items, which is called Elizabeth Mushroom. And if the name doesn't speak for itself, these are pieces of Elizabeth the Mushroom, a character in Ulasil. Although many might have been disappointed with the lack of the Mushroom people. I mean, they're easily one of my favorite enemies. But Dark Souls 2 doesn't disappoint, and why fight them when you can become them? In the Shrine of Amana, if you use the Chameleon spell, you'll turn into one of the Mushroom people. Although I don't know how effective this is for hiding when you're the size of a mountain. And while we're still in the Shrine of Amana, the singers you encounter have a surprisingly close connection to Gravelord Nito. You'll find them spread throughout the area where you can talk to them, but if you can find one of their dresses hidden behind some roots, it mentions how they were given song by the Great Dead One. There's also this character called Grave Warden Agdane, who has close affiliations with the Dark, but he's said to be part of the Finito clan, or maybe group, but one of his lines mentions of an interesting character.
This task was granted to me by the one who gave us the first death.
The first death seems to be referencing Nito, who in the opening of Dark Souls 1 is called First of the Dead. Tie this together with the singer's dress, which mentions the Great Dead One, and it seems that these two characters have close connections with Gravelord Nito. Also, I mean, the names pretty much spell it out. But as mentioned earlier, the 4 old ones are all remnants of the 4 Lord Souls, and if you kill the Rod in a New Game Plus, it drops the Old Dead One's soul, which is clearly referencing Nito, although the most obvious one is the Lost Sinner, where the Bed of Chaos makes a reappearance. And the soul the Lost Sinner drops in New Game Plus is even called the Old Witch Soul, which references the Witch of Izalith. But it becomes a little more obscure as we go on, and it seems that the Duke's dear Freya is a remnant of Seath the Scaleless, and after killing her, she drops the Pale Drake Soul, which can be traded for the Moonlight Greatsword. And if you didn't know, to acquire the same weapon in DS1, you must cut off Seath's tail, and even the DS2 version mentions of a Great White Being, which is referencing Seath. As well as that, after killing Freya, Man-Scorpion Tark mentions that his master never dies and only changes forms. He also says the word Seath, which is just a little too coincidental. And finally, after killing the old Iron King and trading his soul, You can acquire the Blinding Bolt and Dragon Slayer Greatbow, which both have heavy connections to Gwyn or the Four Kings, which have been given fragments of Gwyn's soul. Now, one of my favorite aspects of DS1 seems to be missing within Dark Souls 2, and there's really no sign of the Painted World. There are some connections such as the Monastery set, which is the Painted Guardian set, and the Aged Feather, which references Priscilla, but there is no painting you can enter. Although there is one detail that has major connections to the painting, and Weaponsmith Ornifex is one of the crow demons from the Painted World. And for a brief background, the reason she and many others look like crows is because of their devotion to Velka, a mysterious goddess of sin. But the reason I'm telling you this is because of a character named Cromwell the Pardoner, whose armor references Velka, with it mentioning an ancient goddess where sin was said to be her domain. But this also transitions smoothly into some of the repeating NPCs, and Cromwell the Pardoner is either the twin or wears the same armor as Oswald of Karim. But of course, if we're talking about NPCs, what's a Dark Souls game without Patches? Or I mean mild-mannered pate. And this does have me wondering who Patches will be in Elden Ring, especially with this new focus on NPC stories. But DS2 does reference a lot of characters from DS1. The Craftsman's Hammer mentions it was used by a famed blacksmith, and this is likely to be Andre Vestora. As well as that, the weapon is identical to his. Another one is Ferris's hat, which has some surprisingly confusing lore for what feels like an insignificant item. The hat, if you didn't know, belongs to Ferris, a hunter in Darkroot Garden, and that's what many thought at first. But actually, Ferris was an archer ranked along the likes of Hawkeye Goth, who was one of Gwyn's knights. And this character, who the wiki refers to as Forest Hunter Archer, just happened to come across his gear and decided to wear it. But this is where the Dark Souls storytelling is at some of its best. The same hat in DS2 mentions the hunting goddess Evelina, and how she was no goddess at all, but rather a skilled bow huntress, and how the passing of lore transformed her into a deity. But I find this fascinating because it seems the hunting goddess Evelina was really just our forest hunter, and her story was combined with the godly tale of Ferris, which created this false narrative that was much bigger than anything originally. But let's move on to the most significant connection, and it all relates to the Father of the Abyss, Manus. At the end of DS1's DLC, we face Manus and eventually defeat him. Although that wasn't the end to his soul, and after his death he was reborn into 4 fragments, which throughout time would coalesce into new beings, with each fragment representing an emotion. One of them represented Sorrow, who throughout time became Alsana the Silent Oracle, in which she traveled to Aleum Lois and devoted herself to the Ivory King. The second, with the trait of Wrath, went on to marry the Sunken King, who we actually encounter as a boss called Alana the Squalid Queen. And now you might be noticing this pattern of shards seeking out powerful kings, and as said in the Scythe of Want, they crawled forth, yearning for strong souls in search of greater power. And this is why we find them associated with kings of great strength. Although this next one, who embodies loneliness, managed to break the mold. And in search of a king, she came to the land of the old Iron King, but it was too late and he was already dead. So she does the most logical option and dances herself into smoke and also scatters her soul into these ashen idols. It's an odd one. But I've saved the best for last, and the final fragment, who represents Desire, managed to wiggle her way next to King Vendrick. And if you don't already know, this shard goes by the name of Nashandra, who's the final boss, but more so is the leading cause for really all of the plot. And honestly, it's pretty cool to see how DS2 based their story after the remnant of one boss. I mean, each shard has a major role within the game. But those are all the connections that I'm aware of, and if I missed any other details or got anything wrong, I'd love to know. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I do appreciate you watching up until this point. Have a good one.